introduction, I welcome the gallery and councillors, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Brown to read the live streaming disclaimer.
This council meeting is being streamed live, recorded and published in accordance with council's live streaming in council meetings policy. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the council, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or a presentation will be recorded, and their voice, image and comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The Chair and or the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the determination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions results in inappropriate and or unacceptable behaviour and or comments. Today's meeting is being streamed live as well as recorded and published on the council's website. Thank you.
Welcome everybody. Please ensure that your mobile phones remain off during the council meeting, and we'll now stand for the opening prayer. We pray to God to guide us so that the thoughts we have and the decisions made this day are in the best interests of the people of the South Gippsland Shire. Amen. And I'll pass over to Councillor McEwen. He's going to do the acknowledgement.
The acknowledgement of the traditional custodians. The South Gippsland Shire Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of this land, elders past and present, their spirits and ancestors.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Is there any apologies for future meetings? Good. No apologies. And could I have confirmation of last month's minutes, please?
On with that, Madam Chair.
With the changes.
With the changes.
Okay, that's fine.
So, Councillor, would you like to go?
Yes. That's fine. Thanks.
Councillor Keel, moved, please. Can we change? With the changes?
Yeah, with the changes. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner.
Yeah.
Second. And the changes are?
Oh, okay.
As on the board.
Yeah, okay, as on the board. So I don't have to read that.
There was just a administration error that's been corrected there, that's all. All those in favour of the changes?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Conflicts of interest for councillors.
Conflict of interest for councillors? Conflict. Is there any conflict? You do, Councillor Skinner? Should she state it?
State the nature.
Could you state the nature and the item number, please?
For the item number 4.1 in the closed agenda, the determination of the community grants and indirect conflict of interest as I am employed on the applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other councillor ones? Conflicts of no? Do we? Are there any staff conflict of interest?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we've got two staff conflicts of interest. The first is the Coordinator Grants and Emergency Management has declared an indirect conflict of interest with Council's agenda item 14.2, the Community Grants Round 1 assessment by way of close association with the AUSKIC application is a family relative to the officer. And the second one is myself, Madam Mayor, the Chief Executive Officer. I have declared a direct conflict of interest as I have a personal matter being considered by Council in the closed session, item 14.1. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We'll move now to number 2. There is nil reports under Objective 1 and Objective 2 of the agenda today. And now we have 4.1, the proposed sale of land 155 to 165 Commercial Street, Carnbarra.
I'd like to move
You'd
that.
like to move that. Councillor McEwen's moved, seconded by Councillor Brown.
Now, there is a slight amendment to that one, I understand,
Councillor.
and I will read that out. It's the same motion as in the agenda. Sorry, with the
Have you got a sore knee, Councillor?
No, sorry.
It's all right. No
I was just
medical.
slow to get up. I just coordinated thinking and moving. Item B has been added in. The following land and part thereof is required for sale of private treaty for not less than the valuation obtained not more than 6 months prior to the sale. The sale of this land or part of this land is subject to council not requiring the land for future community hub project currently on consultation. 38 Victoria Street, Carnbarra, being the land described in the certificate of title, volume 6751, folio 160, being approximately 1,631 square metres, and C, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to execute the land sales and conditions of contract of sale as appropriate to the Council's strategic and commercial interests.
Would you like to speak on the matter?
I would say this represents a real milestone for Carnbarra, and it really is a good story. People would be aware that the supermarket has got the planning approval. This is the next piece in the jigsaw. There's a number of pieces in the jigsaw that we're trying to progress in as speedy way as we can, because there's uncertainties for people, particularly in terms of the options for the hub. But this is the requirement that will allow us to develop full lines, sorry, not us, but allow IGA, should they proceed with it, to develop a full line supermarket. I think from memory it would involve an extra 30 to 35 jobs in the town. If people can remember back to the studies that have been done, there is significant retail leakage from the town. This will be a modern state-of-the-art supermarket that will be very attractive when it's developed, and will provide not only jobs but a significant reduction in retail expenditure losses to the town. The addition that's been added in there is the Birraleigh Centre. A part of that is required under the car parking provisions anyway for the supermarket to expand the road. But there are other commercial interests that we've been informed that are interested in there. This will facilitate in one motion then being able to proceed subject to meeting the normal requirements. This whole process has been through Section 223 agreement. The major concerns about this really related to something that wasn't going to happen anyway, which was really the establishment of the mobile library rather than the static library as the interim exchange. So that objection's been met. There was one concern about it being losing a bit of the character of the town, but I think there is the drawings that we've seen are sympathetic treatment of the streetscape, so I don't see that as a major problem. This really is a procedural motion as such. It is reporting back on the fact that the Section 223 agreement has been gone through, and it is now allowing the normal processes to proceed within the requirements of the Local Government Act. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Brown, would you like to speak?
I think Councillor McEwen really said everything that needed to be said, but this is really procedural in a certain way without just going to that next phase of this whole process. It's a great opportunity. Hopefully we get support for it today to take it to that next stage. But as Councillor McEwen said, all the objections have really been dealt with, and I think Section 2.c in the recommendation that says the council will relocate the library to a permanent facility in Carnbarra. So anyone in the community that's not quite sure about that, all they need to do is read this today to show what it is, what our intention is with this facility. So I would ask councillors to please support this motion. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Against? No. Any other speakers? Councillor Skinner.
I I'd like to reiterate a little bit what Councillor McEwen and Councillor Brown said, but as the library, the council representative to the West Gippsland Regional Library Board, I'd like to be really clear, as Councillor Brown said, this should put, the council will relocate the library to a permanent facility in Korumburra, and I'd like to make sure that the community really understands that we have no intention, from the library board has no intention of removing a permanent library facility in Korumburra. There's no doubt there will have to be some temporary arrangement, but we don't know what that is yet. But the community can be assured that they will not lose their library, and there is very clear support and guidance from the West Gippsland Regional Library Board about what is required in a permanent library in terms of access and inclusion and potential future ideas for what libraries are in terms of being involved in community hubs, etc. But we're getting a little bit away from the motion, but I do want to really acknowledge that we have listened, we've seen the submissions about, the public submissions about this. As Councillor McEwen mentioned, a lot of those were sort of relating to the library, not necessarily against this proposed sale of this land, which is what is before us. So I just want to reassure the community that there's plenty of steps to go to from here, and we are going to work through those in a measured and informed way with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Has anyone else like to speak?
Speaking for?
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, if you wish to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to commend the staff for the work they've done and helping to facilitate this along the way. This goes back a number of years with purchases of parcels of land to ensure that this one day could go ahead. So, you know, on behalf of this council and previous councils, the work of staff has not gone unnoticed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Argento. Anyone else? I'll just make a comment. The amendment we put up, the addition to this that we put in this motion, could I have it rolled a little bit, please? It is really to cover that we've also put this 28 Victoria Street out as part of the submission, asking for submissions for a community hub, and this will protect until we get a report back in case we actually need this land. Thank you. And can I put that to the vote, please? All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
.2, proposed new name for Avery Road. How do I have a mover? Councillor Keel. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Argento. Councillor Keel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have much of a track record with road name changing, so I'm hoping this one, because there's no objections, this one will be fine. Avery Lane is an unnamed road. There's 4 properties abutting it, and it runs off the South Victorian Highway. Harry Avery, who the road is being named after, was a local butcher who was in McCartan Street in the 40s and 50s, so this recognises his involvement here in Leongatha. There's been no duplication to the naming of it. There was 4 community members that were affected and no objections, so I'll put that forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Keel. Councillor Argento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, once again, I believe that the 4 parties involved or owners down that lane are quite happy with the names. It has 100% approval from them. It's still subject to geographic place names approval at the end of the day, but yeah, I'm happy to put that to the vote if anybody else doesn't want to put that.
Is there any objection, councillors? No, we're happy for it to go to the vote. I'll put that to the vote, please.
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
4.3 we have next is the Local Roads to Market Program Round 2 application. Do we have a mover? Councillor Brown? Councillor McEwen? Or didn't I look that way? We haven't. Councillor Brown, please.
Madam, we need to read out the amendments.
Oh,
Yeah, just
Yes,
talk to them, yeah.
well, you can talk to them. It's as it is. It changes, yes.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, I'm asking for support for this particular. Council's looking to put in an application to upgrade a bridge, the Ruby Arrowater Road Bridge, and essentially it's a widening of that bridge. That's what we're looking to do. So we can essentially upgrade a bridge that's around 100 years old. It's well past its use by date, and if we were able to get the funding for that, in conjunction with our council's contribution to that project, we can substantially increase the productivity and usability of the roads in that area. So I think that's really what this council is about, is improving basic infrastructure that a lot of people in metro areas take for granted. So this is just another one of those things that shows that we're committed to improving our regional infrastructure and roads. And we have increased the amount from 265,000 in the original, what was in the original agenda, to 300,000. That's what we were requesting. And the council's contribution in the 2018-2019 budget will go from $135,000 to $170,000. So I ask councillors to please support this motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, just very briefly, our whole road and asset maintenance procedure is a credit to all of the officers. Interestingly enough, I think we had a report to us last week. The average life of our bridges is 120 years. This is getting up to that level, but through good asset management and maintenance, we've been able to maintain an effective system of roads and bridges throughout the Shire. This funding, as Councillor Brown indicated, is about improving the connectedness of agriculture to the market. It's about improving efficiencies of market operations, and it indeed is a significant contribution of funds from the state government, if we're successful, towards maintaining our asset properly. Thank you.
Any other speakers against? Any for? Did you want? Councillor.
Just a further bit of information around the increase in funding, which we discussed earlier this morning. Originally, those costings were based on a like-for-like replacement, and further investigation, it's been decided to enhance the structure by widening the carriageway, which is obviously an improvement to the road, and that's the reason for the increase in funding sought, and funding that will potentially be contributed by council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Can we put it to the vote, everyone? I'll put it to the vote, please, councillors.
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
4.4. Do we have a move?
I'll move 4.4 and 5.
Councillor Hill is going to move in block if no one has any objection. 4.4 and 4.5. Councillor Keel will second. Councillor Hill.
Procedural.
Any other speakers? Or we'll put to the vote. If everyone's happy?
Seconder.
Councillor Keel was the seconder.
Now we'll get the vote, please, Madam Mayor, so I can see. We're voting. Councillor Rich, is he vote? Yep. Unanimous, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Okay. Yep.
7.1 is the notice of rescission. 709. You have a mover now.
Thank you.
Councillor Edwards is moving. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder on this rescission notice?
Sorry.
You don't suppose?
I'll second that. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards, Councillor Keel. Councillor Edwards, please. you'd like to?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've submitted this rescission notice because at the previous meeting in October, the key reason for it is around the governance of what we debated at the previous meeting, which is we actually ended up debating the application itself, whereas the debate should have been centred around whether we bring the application in to then debate it. So there's really a governance issue there is my main intent. Since then, we've actually, Councillor Keele and I have visited the Teresa's property, and we've got obviously some other things to learn in the meantime. But I guess there's a few key things that I was concerned about. They've got an absolutely stunning property, and there's nothing personally against the Teresa's in why I put the rescission in. It's around our consistency and our role as councillors in setting policy and not delving into operations. I can understand what individuals are trying to do, but the purpose of the rescission was to debate whether we bring in the application itself. My concern around bringing individual applications in to council is that they can be politically influenced around the table rather than be policy set. And if we don't agree with the policy, then we need to debate the policy and advocate for changes to the policy. If we think that our planners are not using the policy correctly, then that's another debate in itself. But this was, we debated the application itself and the merits of the application, which would have been the next step in the process. And I guess if I use an analogy there, we have state and federal rules around children being immunised. And, you know, your children can't attend school or, for example, do different things unless they're immunised. Now, I may choose not to have, if I choose not to have my children immunised, I don't have our local, federal and state MPs go and debate on the floor of Parliament whether Meg Edwards' children are immunised or not. They debate the policy of the immunisation, not the individual children or the individual family. And this is the risk where I thought we were going down here, is we were debating an individual scenario, even before we should have been got to that, rather than coming back to what is the policy? Does this fit the policy? Does it not fit the policy? Should we even be discussing it at this point? Earlier in that same meeting the last month, we also gave an instrument of delegation to council staff, and that delegation included the administration of the planning policy. We've had issues with the planning scheme in the past, not the planning scheme as such, but the planning of council, where our planning powers got taken off council because of, I guess, trying to go amend things at different times too often that ended up getting taken away from the council. That's the last thing we want to have happen. I certainly have nothing against the individual applicants. I can see what they're trying to do, and I admire what they've done with their property. It's a beautiful property. But I believe we need to be consistent, and that the debate at the last meeting was about their individual application rather than the policy itself, or whether we should bring it in. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Keele, your reserve. Is any speakers against? Councillor Hill.
The reason given for this I find incomprehensible. That to be told we can't talk about the application when we're trying to call it in over a difference of interpretation over whether the application is valid or not, I find is nonsensical. To say we're setting policy that's not operational, again, that makes no sense to me. We're not delving into operations when we are requesting to bring in an application that is a ability of council to do all over Australia. Some councils have determined types of applications that automatically come in or can be called in. We have a couple ourselves at this council. We were just seeking to bring one additional one in. Now, it's not delving in operations. There is no policy issue with this application. There's been a lot of red herrings made about this is policy. We can't talk about this individual application because we have to talk about the policy first if we disagree with the policy. I don't disagree with our planning scheme policy at all. I back it 100%. I said this at the last council meeting. I don't know how many times I need to say that. This application is not about changing policy. It is about an interpretation, or rather a difference of opinion between the way the plans have interpreted and the way I think it should have been interpreted based on our planning scheme. Not based on what I want, but based on what I think the correct interpretation of the planning scheme is. The immunisation analogy I find a bit strange. No one expects an individual child's case about being immunised to go to Parliament because it is a right. They can have that immunisation without having to go to Parliament. It is a right. Just like the Teresa's application is a right to be submitted, and it's a right for Council to hear it. The comments about planning powers being removed in past situations are indeed past situations. We are not attempting to change the current planning scheme at all. We are attempting, I believe, for one particular application to have the current planning scheme applied to it properly and correctly. And I believe it's a proper and correct thing for this council to be able to decide whether it is properly or correctly interpreted and to come to that decision. All the other decisions that are made by the officers are made under delegation, effectively in our name. All I'm asking for with the original motion is to bring one in so that we could do that ourselves, because I believe there are issues with the interpretation of it. Consistency, this is consistent. Having council make a decision on this is perfectly normal government behaviour at local government level. So, I haven't heard one valid reason why a rescission motion should have been brought today. A rescission motion, for those who don't know, has one of two reasons. One is if after the motion is passed, a council motion, the law changes and makes that motion illegal, council therefore can't act on that motion, so it has to be rescinded. Another one is when a motion of council is determined and circumstances change, and I can give you a perfect example. We approved $1 million something spent on a road up Poolong a year ago. When they started work on it, they found some earthworks. So they had to stop that and direct the money somewhere else. We had a rescission motion on the original application, because otherwise council would have to keep on doing it when it was illegal to do so because of the worms. And the other reason for a rescission motion, if the original information provided to council was inaccurate in a substantial way or misleading, then a rescission motion in that case would be perfectly acceptable in that instance too. But I haven't heard one valid reason why this particular rescission motion is being brought today, other than I think like the opinion of council on the day, and I want it changed. So, Councillor,
can I have you sit please for a moment? Because I'm going to call, I'm going to read, could you please remain seated please? A rescission notice is I believe there's any councillor's right to call a rescission notice. Under Division 6, listing a rescission, if a decision of council to be amended or rescinded, the motion for an amendment or rescission must be carried. But anyway, it is every councillor's right, and it is in the purpose of this rescission notice what was said that the mover of this believed that when this was debated in the previous council meeting, it was debated on the merits of the application, not on the pros and cons or merits of bringing it to council to make that decision. So it is every councillor's right to bring a rescission notice under our local law. Councillor Hill, can you continue? Did I use my... But you've got 30 seconds, Councillor Hill.
I'm not sure why I was interrupted there, Madam Mayor, sorry. I wasn't saying that it was that Councillor said no right.
You've got 30 seconds, Councillor.
Microphone. I wasn't suggesting that Councillor Edwards didn't have a right to bring a rescission motion in. I don't know why you interrupted me on that occasion. And I lost my train of thought now because of that. Thank you. So I haven't heard one valid reason why there was a rescission motion. And I would request my fellow councillors to dismiss this one and allow council's original decision to stand, and for the applicants to have a fair hearing from their councillors.
Councillor, anyone for? Speaker for? Any speakers against?
Yes.
Councillor Rich, I think.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It seems quite interesting. We have a policy and we have an application, and how the policy applies to the application. So I don't really see how they are mutually exclusive, because if you say, no, we can't consider the application, we can't consider the policy, I feel like I'm in a Monty Python film, because one directly relates to the other. We do have a problem with interpretation. I agree with Councillor Hill. This is part of our current planning policy. I've asked the question of our senior planners, is there any reason why the Victorian planning schemes can't go ahead? Oddly enough, I never got an answer, because I think that my other planning fellows up in Melbourne would say, if that's the will of the council, then that's what can happen. So we need to be able to have a look at our policy, and if there's a circumstance, because you're absolutely right, we delegate our authority to the planning department. So that means that it's us making the decision to allow them to make decisions on our behalf. We are responsible for those decisions. So therefore, it's not without merit for us to be able to say, look, in this particular case, I think it's a way of interpreting what is going on within our planning department. If we do feel as though, wait a second, let's have a look at the process that you've been through to come up with that interpretation. I think that's our role. And so to put a rescission notice up, to me, actually felt more like we were, instead of trying to do what I'm trying to do in council, which is to put forward systematic ways of approaching things on a policy basis, I'm like, well, wait a second, we're not allowing them to do that. Let us have a look at how are you applying those policies that we have? Are you applying them in an interpretive way that we as the common people that are elected by the people of this region interpret it? Or is it this done on a professional basis that this is our planning policy and we don't want someone else to interpret it in a way that wasn't? They weren't voted to do that. They were voted to do it. We were voted to do that. They're paid to do a professional job. All we're asking is to have a look at that process. And at the moment, I feel as though we're dragging poor applicants through a lot more sort of hurdles and chains than we really need to. Because when you look at this isn't like it's a farm that's come along at the last minute trying to do a backroom deal to be able to go, look, I just want to get this through, because they've been running this farm like this for a very long time. They've provided all the information that they're required to provide. They've actually been asked to provide it in a way that, how about if you put it like this, they've followed all the rules and to only end up down a dead-end path. Now, unfortunately, I don't think they're the only people in this region that have come across that type of situation, and so therefore I think it's reasonable that we've asked them to come in. And on that basis, I implore my fellow councillors to at least hear it and see how our planning department is interpreting our particular planning scheme. Thank you.
Councillor Kieran, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an absolutely perverse outcome. An applicant comes in wanting to separate two properties which are on two titles and create two viable farms which have been operated this way at the moment. One 30 acres around, 30 to 50 acres around more intensive farming operations biodynamically, and the other being a dairy. Council's plan very clearly supports this type of initiative because it's about diversifying agriculture. Council's planning scheme is also very clear about this, that you are entitled to have a house if you're doing intensive farming. But the reality is the house is already there. The way this is being treated is totally improper.
Can I call a point of order? Which one? I think we're straying from the topic. We're going back into the motion and it's point number
73.
63, relevant to the motion, which is about the decision.
Yes, I will uphold that, Councillor Skinner. I believe that you may be straying off the rescission notice, which is about recommendation about whether we call this in the application or not the merits of the application, Councillor McEwen. So if you could continue, can you stick to the merits of calling it in, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think these are absolutely pertinent because that's the arguments the other councillors have put forward. So I will continue, but my arguments are clearly saying that it is appropriate the decision that was held, not the rescission motion. The arguments that were given by the council staff against this development are this is a boundary realignment. It is not a subdivision. It's been treated as a rural development subdivision. We need to re-examine this and see whether there is consistency. At no stage has anyone ever, in last meeting or today, suggested that this is about changing policy. That's an absolute red herring. It is about how the policy is being interpreted and the perverse outcomes that are likely to occur, which are not consistent with council's policy. It's not a governance issue. Council's role is in an operational, it's not an operational or governance issue. Council's role is to determine planning applications. It can devolve them and delegate them to officers, but the head of powers and responsibility is with councillors. So if councillors believe there is a misinterpretation of the planning laws, it is totally within their ambit to do that. It is very sad in some ways. I don't know if people are aware, but yesterday the Herald and Weekly Shine Awards were announced. And for our area, Gippsland, we had 3 of the 5 Australian results being women who are leaders in farming. We've also had 2 from South Gippsland, one being the Plum Coast Food Collective.
Councillor, could you please stay on relevant to calling this motion in? It's about calling it in. Can you stay to the relevance of what...
Madam Mayor, if I may just finish this, the rest of that sentence is about the relevance. We've had Sally and Anne from Plum Creek Country Food Collective get a national award. We've had Kirsten and Flick Jones get a national award for leading in farming. This is the type of farming that is already going on in that property. And to call this motion, to rescind the motion to call it in to view it properly is tantamount to saying that these type of activities are not to be encouraged. This is clearly a case where we need to call it in to make sure that there is consistency with the planning scheme. Because at the moment, my interpretation of what's going on is there's not. And what we're going to do if this goes through is potentially vote against having yet another viable agricultural business that is producing product and produce that is adding to the reputation of this area. So my view is that this rescission motion is improper, that it doesn't actually argue successfully what it was looking for, and that really there is no governance matter here, there is no conflict with operational procedures, there is no there's no conflict with policy. It is really around how this is being interpreted, and it's being interpreted, in my view, the wrong way, and we should be reviewing how that is interpreted, because we need to be supporting small-scale intensive farming. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Brown.
I'll also be voting against this particular motion. So in last month's council meeting, I voted against 7.1 and 7.2. In my opinion, then and now, I believe the planners have done a competent job in dispensing the powers that we've given to them, and I still believe that that's the case. However, this 7.2 did get the majority support of councillors in the last meeting, and I think that does deserve respect, and it does deserve to be looked at. If we have a look at what 7.2 actually talks about, section 2 of that motion, it says, request the CEO produce an officer report for the motion comprising the following recommendations. A, approve the officer recommendation, or approve an alternative motion to be submitted as an alternative recommendation on the day. I think whatever happens with this particular agenda item, it will have to set a strong precedence for the future of this Shire, and it is an important issue that needs to be dealt with. But I think we should go through the process. We did get the support. Let's get feedback from the officers, and let's be fully informed, so all the councillors can be fully informed on this particular issue, and then we make our decisions accordingly. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, Councillor Skinner.
Councillor Chair. I concur with you, right, absolutely, that any councillor is able to submit a notice of rescission. I will be supporting my decision. Previously, I understand what Councillor Edwards said about that we strayed into the actual merits of the application, and I said it on the day. I was very swayed by the loveliness of the operation, and I like all of that. So I'm going to try and pull it back today to looking at what our role is, and that is oversight. We do have a place to oversight certain applications, and if rightly or wrongly there has been concern about the way the process has been either dealt with or the decision has been made, then I feel it is our duty and our right to have a look at that. I want to be very, very clear that this does not mean that I will or won't support this particular application, but I feel like I could do with some more detailed information, particularly from the planners, and seeing the whole process stepped through. I'm aware that this looks like it's setting a precedent. I really don't want it to, but I feel it is part of our role is oversight and to find as much information as we can to support the decisions that we and our administration are making. I do acknowledge that the Trees family have been, it's been a long process for them, and because we don't meet in January, it might drag out for longer than it could be. I believe we do actually have some good processes in place for bringing applications in, which is 5 objectives or more, or the CEO determines whether it is a controversial political topic. But I think this is worth supporting. I concur with Councillor Brown's statement. It received a majority view last time. I think we need to go through this process, and before we receive that report, which is excellent, we are receiving some expert training in planning interpretation as well, which I think will be really useful to look at this application with those eyes, understanding none of us are planners, and I will be respecting the report that comes back from the officers on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Any other councillors? Would you like to go to the vote? Oh, you return?
Right, only briefly.
Councillor Keele. Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be really brief. I'm just reiterating what Councillor Edwards put forward. I believe that we debated the actual application rather than the policy, and the issue was about calling in the application by the CEO, not actually about the Trees application. That's all.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to each of my fellow council colleagues. I respect each of your views on this, and as I said earlier, I certainly respect the Trees and what they're doing there. Just a couple of things. There's been the word intensive brought up a couple of times. The Trees have said that their operation is not intensive. It is biodynamic. It's a beautiful property. It's not intensive though, so that's coming into it. Not all of the farmers who are part of the, and I'm an active supporter of the Comcoast Food Collective, and they're not all small farms under 100 acres, for example. I mean, I know that the pig farm is 165 acres that runs that, so we're not, I don't think that's a really relevant example, because I support agriculture in general, so it's about protection of obviously agricultural land, and the intent, as I understand it, of the planning scheme is to protect our agricultural resources and land. given that I respect each of your views around the table as well, there is an appeal process which I'm a little bit confused why it hasn't been taken up, which is VCAT. So when somebody doesn't, which could...
Point of order, not relevant to the motion.
Just stand please, sit please, Councillor.
63. Councillor Edwards is not talking to her own motion, she's now talking about other things not related to the motion.
Councillor Hill, I will uphold that. And I will remind Councillor Edwards to please stay on topic about the rescission notice.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess yes. Sorry, I also have another point of order. So yes, I appreciate that there's different views around the table. I guess I am about consistency, and that the debate last time was centred around the individual application and not whether we should bring it in or not. I guess that mention of VCAT was about that could have been another avenue for them to go down instead of as an alternative to having it come to the council table. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'd just like to make a generalised comment, and that's our planning scheme is difficult when we read it in part. We must read it in full.
We've already can't talk there, you have to go vote.
You are correct, Councillor Hill. Who is he?
I think he's right on the money.
I think he's on the money. To the vote, please. Those in favour? Oh, no, those in favour of the rescission notice, yes.
So it's Councillor Keogh, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Brunt.
Those against?
It's Councillor Rich, Councillor Hill, Councillor Brown, Councillor Gente, Councillor Skinner and Councillor McEwen. The rescission motion is lost.
Now, next item on the agenda is 7.2. Yes.
Which bit?
7.2 needs to be moved because in the last recommendation, the recommendation in the October meeting, there was a date set for the report back to this meeting, which is the 22nd of November. So the report now is recommended, what will be Councillor Hill will be moving, is it will be brought to the 20th of December 17, and Councillor McEwen is seconding it. Councillor Hill.
Okay, thank you, fellow councillors, for that decision. I'd just like to, obviously this is a procedural one now, I would like to talk about one thing that was raised though, about the precedent being set. There's no precedent being set on this particular application when it comes to council. Every application is decided on its merits, that is the planning scheme. And there's a difference between this application and any other dairy farm of similar size, I believe. I've been around a lot of farms, especially when I was campaigning last year.
Thank you.
Since 63, I appreciate that point of view, but that's not what we're debating here. Change of date.
Yes, I'll uphold that, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Hill, I think it's just about changing the date for the report to come back. If I could bring your attention to that. Yes.
Resolve the original resolution we brought to the December meeting.
Yes,
correct.
just the
I'm
date.
just trying to work out how I can see so much words in it. Okay, I'll take my seat.
I think
I'll resist the temptation to point of order, Madam Mayor.
would you like to speak, or would we go?
Procedural.
Well, okay, I think we'll go to the vote to change the date to the report.
That's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
7.3 is the e-petition for the South Gippsland bus service.
I'll move that
That
way,
is Councillor McEwen is the mover. Councillor Rich is the seconder. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Chair. This issue has come up through the South West Gippsland Transport Group. South Gippsland clearly deserves much better than it's getting in terms of the level of services for buses. We have put forward an e-petition with Melina Barth's support in the Legislative Council. It's an e-petition. People can access it either by going to the South West Gippsland Transport's Facebook page and a direct link, or going to the Legislative Council e-petition. The petition is basically saying this motion is saying we want council to support the e-petition. We want them to promote it through social media. We want them to write to the Honourable Minister Jacinta Allen supporting the motion, and we want to write to local parliamentarians supporting it. The Transport Group, the Transport Group did a study. What that study did was look at the provision of local bus services, cross-regional bus services and services to Melbourne. If you look at local bus services, there are 18 towns, and the majority of shires in the state, with a town of around Leongatha or Carnbara, actually have a local bus service. So we've got 18 towns that are of the same size or smaller and have a local bus service, and we don't. If you analyse, because our bus service really is a service to Melbourne with a couple of cross services through Merthyr, the most 72% of people in our shire in towns don't have ready access to bus services, so they can't get to essential services unless they have a car. I looked in the public health plan the council did. There's a really telling statistic sitting in there. They look at how many people in the shire are within shires are within 800 metres of a bus stop. We've got, I think, 8.5%. If you look at Gippsland as a whole, it is 35%. If you look at the state, which obviously includes Melbourne, it's 74%. We are chronically disadvantaged. There are major problems. It was interesting hearing our committee on the active retirees group arguing with us last week, saying we needed to deal with buses for older people. But it's younger people, it's people who have to go to court, it's people who have to go to hospitals, people who want to go to meet friends. You can't do that at the moment. If you look at Wonthaggi, and I'm not begrudging what they've got, in fact I'd love to have what they've got, they have got a local bus service to Cowes, to Phillip Island, to Coronet Bay, to Wonthaggi North, to Cape Patterson and to Inverloch. There's 27 services, 26 services a week. We are entitled to a similar level of service. This petition, if it's supported, and we understand there may be some money left over from the Warragul bus service improvements, that this could be done. What we're asking for is three things. One is either a local bus service that you do a ring route around Leongatha, Carnbara and some of the outlying areas, but that would just run during the day. The alternative is a telebus service where basically you ring up and a bus will come close to you, not necessarily to your door, and then it will take you to where you need to go. They're working very successfully in a number of outer suburban areas and in rural shires. That would be really good. The other thing we're talking about is having more cross-regional services. We've got two major hospitals, and if you haven't got a car, you can't really access them with the frequency of buses. And the other one is to improve it. And I looked at Castlemaine, and I think there was 24 daily services in from Castlemaine, which is a similar size to sort of Leongatha, and certainly to Leongatha and Carnbara. They've got 24 services a day, and we've got 6. So this is really saying, in terms of the state government's report on connecting rural Victoria, which I thought was an excellent report, Minister Jacinta Allen launched last year, they talked about equity and the importance of local bus services. Well, unfortunately, out of that report, nothing has been provided to South Gippsland. We are a black hole, literally, in terms of bus provision, and I think that we should be allowed to be treated fairly and with respect and have the same level of services other shires of similar size and similar towns have. Thank you.
Councillor Richard. You'd like to reserve? Dangerous. You won't get a chance. Anyway, you'd like to reserve?
Yeah, reserve and I'll speak.
Any speakers against?
I just have some concerns, and unfortunately we haven't had an opportunity to discuss Councillor McEwen's motion prior to today, so I have some concerns in it, in that it doesn't, we're asking for state government funds to be allocated to it, but we don't know how much. So we're asking taxpayers to fund something that we don't know what the cost will be. It has a cost on the environment, obviously, straight off the bat, because we're going to be asking for transport around the town. I do acknowledge that transport is an issue, however, for particularly our older residents. So that is something that we need to address. I'm just not sure that this is the vehicle, and I'd be keen to see this, the objective explored further of getting the outcome right. I'm not sure that this is the right that this is the right vehicle. That's not meant to be a pun here, but not the right mechanism to get the outcome. There's some other schemes that now exist that could be worthwhile exploring in terms of co-sharing vehicles and Uber and different things that would not necessarily mean having a big ask on state government or taxpayers' funds, but that could be more environmentally friendly and be a lower cost option, more flexible. Uber and there's other alternatives to that too. There's other co-sharing sites and different things that we might be able to hook into. We have a high percentage of volunteers in this region. Maybe there's an opportunity to channel some of that volunteerism into, how do we, get people to hospitals when they need and post in that way. I'd just like to explore some other alternatives before we push for this particular one, which might have some pros and cons. We don't know the costs, but I am supportive in general of trying to get to the outcome. The outcome is getting better transport options, particularly for our elderly residents. And I think if we're going to aim for that, it does need to be to their door, because there's no point being, if they've got accessibility issues, there's no point being down the street. We actually have a reasonable bus service as it is to Melbourne now. We have 8 services each way to Melbourne from Leongatha. I think there's about 3 or 4 to as far as Yarram. There's cross services from Wonthaggi Block 3 to the Valley, but I do understand that they're not always as flexible or as door to door. So maybe there's some other alternatives. I'm supportive of the outcome, but not necessarily because we haven't explored the other alternatives. I'm not going to be in support of pushing this one forward, because I think we've got some responsibility to look at one of the other options first. Thank you. Councillor Argento. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I commend Councillor McEwen on his motion. It is an advocacy role that we need to play, and it's great that he's able to bring this forward to instigate some sort of discussion to generate. We have an ageing demographic, particularly along our coastal areas, that aren't particularly serviced at this point. And I've been approached by numerous community members in regard to having transport to be able to get to doctor's appointments and such. We were approached also by the Carnborough Secondary School students who wanted to know if that could be instigated so they would have somewhere to go during their holidays and not rely on their working parents enabling them to get to different towns. So that was brought up some time ago. So I'd just like to let councillors know that I'm in favour of this motion and hope that it will be supported. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I believe this is part of a suite of opportunities to advocate for better transport for our area. I think we probably all agree that transport is a big problem, or challenge, should I say, in the area, and that there's no easy one solution. So I believe this notice of motion has come because the South West Transport Group published a report on lack of opportunities, and so I think we need to be fluid and responsive and respond to that. So I appreciate what Councillor Edwards is saying. This isn't the only answer, and I've been directly involved in the community and championing different versions of a bus service that has been problematic. People say they want something and then they don't use it, and I'm sure gallery members will remember these challenges in the community. We had some funding to roll out a bus service. Everyone wanted it, my kids used it, but it went at the wrong times for most of the communities, so we lost it. But anyway, I think there's lots and lots of emerging solutions. I think Councillor Argento's point about, for our younger people, they're really stuck until they're 18 and they can get their licence. They're very dependent on family and or friends. I understand what Councillor Edwards is saying. There's always an impact on our roads environmentally, but so there is driving your kids around from etc. So we absolutely have to be mindful of that. But I see this as taking an advocacy opportunity based on a report by a key interest group and acknowledging what is in our council plan and acknowledging that this has great benefits for our community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Skinner. Just Councillor Keele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, sorry, Councillor Rich. I'd actually like to concur with my fellow councillors as well. Our public transport does leave a little bit to be desired here. Yes, we might have some frequency in some of our timetables, but for the kids it is well and truly outside. I know moving north, you know, we can get them to the beach and they can only be at the beach 2 hours and then they've got to be on their way home because the services aren't just quite lining up for them to have a full day out. So hats off to Councillor McEwen for getting his group to put this petition forward. It will give a lot of people a chance to show their support for us to look at other ways to increase our transport. Thanks.
Is there any other councillors? Councillor Rich.
Thank you very much, Madam. The wheels of government move slowly. I see no reason to make them even slower. So perhaps we should look to find ways of finding solutions rather than continue to find problems. I do believe that environmentally it's not a great argument because public transport is something we need to invest in to take cars off the road. Because otherwise we're left with every single person driving their children or themselves to shop with this, the elderly, to be able to use a car. So it's a kind of a strange argument to do with the environmental side of things. When we look at the state government funding, this is low-hanging fruit. We at the moment do not receive funding from the state government which we are entitled to. So I think it's very admirable to feel as though we should look after the state government's profits, but I also believe it's our best interest to look after our region's personal interests of getting public transport. Now, Councillor McEwen very heavily or nicely dragged me onto this particular group, and I've learned a lot since. That we don't have much public transport, but we really do need it. That there are smart bus options as part of a number of seats that I go to, that they look at being able to pick people up door to door to be able to then coordinate to the regional transport buses. So with the technology of today, we should be able to have a more efficient way of not having bus services which go from A to B and are inflexible and therefore don't get used and we lock into a contract for 12 months. We have one that will coordinate from the smart bus system to the regional buses, which hopefully will allow people to get a book a trap from Melbourne down to Sandy Point. But don't be wrong, I think that this first step is still a few steps away from the final integrated transport plan that we need. But we need to start making those first steps, and we need to start getting those funds from the state government to do so. So I certainly applaud the group, and I also, just to put on the table this last one, active retirees, they are very strong supporters because the problem is that if there's no other method of transport, they drive. Now, please, I know this is broadcast live, so it's probably a good thing that some of the elderly people don't have other options to drive than just driving. I'm never always that comfortable if I see him on the road, I slow down a bit and hopefully he'll go ahead a bit further. But it really is safer for us to be able to have other options that they can use. Plus, at the moment, we have a patient transfer vehicle within Leongatha. And that is being used in circumstances that could otherwise be used for a more productive method or means. So if we were to get state government funding into our public transport system, that may actually free up local funding for us to do other more important health and safety things for our community. So this is the start of what I'm hoping that we will see as an integrated transport management plan, but we have to start somewhere. As I said, the wheels of government move slowly, and let's not try and make them move any slower than they currently do.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's an old adage, if you don't ask, you don't get. This is not about us paying a cent. It's about our residents who are taxpayers in the state and in the Commonwealth getting their equitable share of resources. We are already paying for local bus services across the state. This motion is simply saying let's argue and ask the state government to provide it. I understand that Councillor Evans was saying we should have worked out what the cost is. We're not traffic engineers or transport engineers. That is the state government's responsibility. If they are going to be responsive, they will come back and say, well, it's going to cost this much and we can't afford it. Secondly, Councillor Edwards talked about problems of an environmental impact. I just do not get the logic in that. Buses actually have a significantly lower ecological or environmental footprint than in fact cars have. The more you can get people into buses, the lower the greenhouse impact is going to be in our community, and it's more efficient in terms of costs for people. The ride share scheme that Councillor Edwards raised, Council's already supporting a ride share scheme. We're promoting one. What we're really saying is that in this motion is that we haven't got a local bus system. Churchill, that's got 4,500 people, has got a local bus system. There are a number of towns. This is simply asking for an equitable and fair share. The telebus system is really interesting. The figures on it are saying, and this is where they don't come necessarily to your door, they come close to it. It is actually cheaper than patient transport. The state government is saving money when they've implemented this because they can get rid of the patient transport system. Council would save around $37,000 because we're providing a local bus service in effect for some people, when if we had a local bus service that would be provided by the state government as it is elsewhere. In the end, I agree with Councillor Rich and with Councillor Skinner. We need an integrated transport plan in the end. This is the first step, and as Councillor Gentoo said, we should be advocating on behalf of our community. We are getting requests. There are serious problems for young people getting around. There are serious problems which have been pointed out for education people. Young people with apprenticeships find it very difficult to get around because there's no transport. They are dependent on adults or others to drive them around, and that shouldn't be the case. We should be arguing solidly together and advocating for our fair share of the cake, and this motion, if it is successful, will be part of the process of advocating to state government for an equitable share. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Yes.
Councillor McEwen, Councillor Skinner, Councillor Gentoo, Councillor Brown, Councillor Brunt, Councillor Hill, Councillor Keel and Councillor Rich.
Those against?
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you.
Not against, yeah.
Moving on to item 7.4, which is a notice of motion 711, and it's South Gippsland Shire Council to create a coastal strategy. Do I have a mover, please?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that.
Councillor Gentoo to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McEwen. Patience. Councillor McEwen, do you want me to speak straight?
Gentoo moved it.
Councillor Gentoo. He's jumping out of his chair over there. He's confusing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, I'd like to propose an amendment, please, Madam Chair.
I would have been happy to speak on it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'd like to propose an amendment that Council investigates the development of a coastal strategy. A, the strategy may consider the impact on opportunities of potential growth and development in the coastal areas, including the immediate hinterland. B, the strategy may identify appropriate amenities, facilities and services in the townships and villages, taking into account of the impact of further growth of housing in coastal towns in relation to sewage and services. Strategy may focus on managing coastal land and infrastructure, including Crown land, managing population growth, adapting to changing climate, integrating marine planning and valuing the natural environment. Section 2 is to be a report on the resources and timing of the strategy should be received by Council by March of 2018.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you,
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Councillor Rich, would you like to continue to see on it?
Yes, I would. Look, one of the reasons that I ran for Council was to try and input a strategic approach to things. We have a state government policy and a federal government policy. We seem to have a space that is lacking of our own coastal areas. We have had reports now from the West Gippsland Catchment Authority that looks at the rising...
Councillor, can you speak on the amendment while we've done an amendment at this point?
So we don't remember to put this up.
No, one's investigating.
Oh, the reason that we've changed the wording is to give it more functionality. So the original wording, some people found that the functionality may not be achievable within the timeframes, and we needed to ensure that the timeframes were achievable and attainable. I was looking to ensure that we can get it done at the fastest rate possible without actually taking away from the quality of work. And that's the most important thing. I don't want to sort of see it in the never never. Yes, I'd like to do this idea, it never happens. But I also didn't want to impose too great a cost and throw the kitchen sink at it to get it done. So trying to find that exact balance, and I've hopefully worked with all of our fellow councillors to come up with that. And that was the reason for the end. Thank you.
This.
That was the next question.
Second.
If it gets passed.
Yes, but you can speak on the amendment.
I'm not sure if I need to speak on the amendment.
Oh, if you're happy not to, that's okay.
I did give it a 2. Really, I agree with Councillor Rich. We worked together on this. It was, because of the timing of a public holiday and when the agenda went out, a notice of motion was included in the agenda that we didn't have time to fully consider the wording and the impact on the administration and the officers and the timing. So we equally we need to be measured in what we're asking, and before we're making any decisions, we need to understand what the scope and the cost of them. And that's why there's an amendment to the notice of motion. Thank you.
If councillors are happy enough to put this amendment to the vote? All those in favour of the amendment?
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
The amendment will now become the motion, and Councillor Rich, I believe you'll only. Has he got a vote? He's got a vote to move it.
No. Now it's the question before the chair.
And now it's the question before you can now speak on the motion.
Yes.
Thank you for talking to me. Once again, going back to what I said originally, but we have one of the most amazing coastlines in Australia, as far as I'm concerned. And there are opportunities for both agriculture, tourism, agriculture, lifestyle, recreation, but we have to manage it correctly. We have to look at where the assets are, what are the environmental problems, where are the regions that can and cannot support growth, what the population is going to look like in 20, 30 years, and what we need to do to facilitate that. Now, I've always felt as though when I go across the Tarwell Ridge, in many ways it feels like I'm going back in time 50 years. It's because if you go down to the Bellarine Peninsula, you'll notice that they have proper parking, proper signs, proper walking trails. And we have some of them. I'm not actually putting down my Shire in any way, shape or form. I'm saying we can do a lot better job. And the best way to do a better job is to do a strategic approach. So even if we come up with the overall, I'd love to see a walking trail go from Wilson Cemetery to Phillip Island one day. That may take 60 years or 100 years. But if we don't start to have the vision, then we're never going to get there. So we need to actually start going, all right, well, what are the parameters? What are we looking for? So that people have greater surety when they come to this region and go, all right, well, what is possible, what is not possible? What does the community want, what does it not want? What does the state government want? So that's a big one for me, is making sure that our policies are aligned with the state and federal government. Because as we know, we've got rate capping nowadays, which means that our source of funding can't just come from rates, it has to come from grants, it has to come from other sources of revenue. So to get those other sources of revenue, the best way to do it is to have a structured strategic approach where people are transparent and accountable, people can look at it, they can understand what the criteria is, what are the different issues that need to be attended to, and therefore they have that certainty, or some greater certainty, greater certainty in terms of the outcomes that they're looking for. So I think that this is very important. We've seen things along the coast. For instance, I have a lot of feedback from the community on Walkerville, which I come from. I'd like to see it done properly. I'd like to see walking trails and a greater investment. But unless we have an overall structured plan that lets us say, this is what we are identifying as our key strategic environmental assets, and this is how we should approach them, it feels ad hoc. It feels like it's a piecemeal. This group here wants that group there wants that. When we really and truly, we need to work out, well, what do we have a common denominator on? And let's work together on those things so that we actually achieve things rather than just have what seems to be around about 12 feet. So I hope that we really can get on with this, and that this will set a future direction for putting policies that give us a result in place.
Councillor Rich, could I please make a suggestion too that you might like to think about that point number 2, that you make a date on March. The March meeting is on the 28th of March. Number 2, it is Natasha.
Just or by the council meeting in March.
Yeah, well, that's the 28th of March, so by end of March or something. Would that be okay? The seconder is the seconder happy with that? Okay.
Councillors, all the councillors.
And all the councillors?
Yeah.
Yes, all right. Everybody's happy with that. Just a small correction. Councillor Skinner, you second this. Do you want to speak or is it?
Could I just clarify what we just did then actually?
We just put it...
Are we asking to have it by the council meeting or by the end of March?
That could mean in April.
End of March means end of March. Or
No.
By the council meeting?
Do you want it on the 28th?
Yeah.
Yes.
It has to be council meeting.
Well, at the formal at March's formal
meeting. Yeah.
How's that?
Yes.
It's a formal. It have to
It
be.
should be
formal.
at. If it's by, you could have it in February.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
At the formal council. Can you put formal? Could be any council meeting.
The ordinary council.
Ordinary council meeting. Thank you. Are you happy to accept that? Everybody happy to accept that? Councillor Skinner, would you like to continue?
Thanks. Well, I hope that this notice of motion actually demonstrates that we're learning how to do our job. So it was, this has been discussed amongst councillors about the appropriateness of looking at maybe we might need a coastal strategy, and it's emerged in response to a couple of things that have happened, and as Councillor Rich said, there's been some feedback from the West Gippsland Water Catchment Authority that has influenced some planning and development decisions. There's been there's a domestic wastewater review happening around our shores. We know a lot of our coastal areas are septic systems. We have coastal erosion and climate change issues. We have infrastructure and potential development. We have beautiful coastline assets, and we have we're being discovered. We've had a tourism briefing earlier today. Potentially our coastal areas are going to become more developed or visited, and we need to really plan very well for that. In addition, we've got a number of coastal foreshore groups that are managed by other stakeholders, the Department of Land, Water, Planning and Environment, and Water Catchment Authority, Parks Victoria. I would like to see this report take into account opportunities to either partner with in the development of this strategy and with those other agencies who are all benefit. We had a briefing earlier about looking at sort of a more holistic approach to, for example, Waratah Bay and the management of the resources there. So we need to, I think, take a step back, which is what we're doing. We're calling for some information on what scope would be required, what costings would be required to develop a coastal strategy with reference to state, federal government policies, other stakeholders' points of view, etc. And I think that's responsible council behaviour. What was I going to say? So I fully support this motion, and I believe it's being done in a measured and appropriate way, so that we can make a more informed decision when we get some more information in March. Thank you.
Any speakers against?
I'd like to raise a minor amendment.
I'd like to do an amendment. Yes, Councillor Smith. Do you know? Ed Edwards.
Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Madam Mayor, I'm in support overall of the coastal strategy, but I think it's just lacking in one point. My apologies to Councillor Rich for not bringing this up prior to today. It doesn't mention about protecting our agricultural land and the biosecurity requirements around agricultural land. So if the mover and secretary are happy to, I'd like to consider adding a 6 point to where the strategy says strategy may focus on, and that is we've got valuing the natural environment. We haven't actually got valuing agricultural land and biosecurity requirements. So
Yes.
I believe one amendment can only be heard at one time.
It's the motion.
that's the motion before.
Just to amend the...
Oh, yes, you are correct, Councillor Argento, very correct. We've got an amendment before the chair. We can't amend an amendment. We can't amend a motion.
You haven't got an amendment. That's now the motion.
That's the motion.
The mover and seconder can approve that if they choose to.
Yeah.
So if the discussion is about agreements to that movement.
Correct.
Yeah. No, that's the motion before the chair.
It's the motion. It's not
So, Councillor Skinner, are you moving an amendment?
No.
Councillor Edwards.
So it was. I think the process is that if it's satisfactory to the mover and the seconder, that we
Not
add
necessarily.
that in agricultural and the biosecurity requirements around it.
you best follow
You best follow and
So
just
you need a
move it as
seconder.
an amendment and
so
have a seconder.
Yeah,
Need
do
a
I have a
seconder.
seconder for that?
So we're moving an amendment.
Yep.
No worries.
Yeah.
Yep.
You move the amendment.
Is that what it's saying as, Councillor Edwards? Valuing.
No.
It's just adding one point, which
Adding
is
adding that extra point, which is valuing agricultural land and the biosecurity requirements,
and it'd have to have the bias.
which is part of that same line. So it's one point.
Does it need to have that?
No, I don't think
Yes.
it does personally.
Yes.
Specific.
Shh. Do we have a seconder? The amendment will lapse for no seconder. Can we continue those? I'll just wait till the.
Yeah, wait.
I'll wait for Natasha to catch up. I think I was up to do it. Does anyone want to speak against this motion? Any speakers against?
Respectful.
Councillor McEwen. And then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's interesting. You spend some time in an area and you become so familiar with it, you don't actually appreciate what's there. We've actually got a very long coastline from Venus Bay around the prom and then through Corner Inlet and out further out. It's got a diverse series of ecosystems in there. It is very attractive, and quite clearly with the 14% growth overnight visitors, well, 14%, we're going to have more and more people coming. We need to manage this. Councillor Rich is absolutely right. There are very clear national policies, there are clear state policies, but there is not a clear local policy. This motion will enable us to form a strong partnership with a range of coastal stakeholders, from coastal management groups to departments, etc. This is imperative for this area. We have got natural beauty, but we need to protect it, to enhance it, and to ensure that appropriate and sustainable development occurs in that area. To me, and some of this has been said, there are significant issues that are occurring. Sea level rise has increased by 100%, the rate of it in the last 18 months. So it's doubled. The Catchment Management Authority is now saying that there are issues. We know that there are issues on Foster Beach. We know that there are issues starting to occur around the foreshore that we have to manage. The Walkerville development, I've spoken to the chairman of the Walkerville Foreshore Committee. We're at one in saying we need to have a plan like this so that we can tackle the state government, because the cost of doing these remedial works and protective works is going to be well beyond
the scope of council and these community groups. This is really important investment in the future of the Shire, and if we have a plan done and if we have a strong partnership in place, we will get resources. In fact, I think it was the chairman of the Victorian Tourism Advisory Committee was in the paper several months ago saying that significant investments had gone in to tourism and facilities along the western part of the state. We haven't had the equivalent investments in here. The way that politics goes, if you haven't got a plan, if you haven't got the stakeholders on the same page, you won't get it. This project, I think, will facilitate the development of a strategy, the development of strong partnerships, and hopefully then the getting of the resources to implement whatever's proposed.
Thanks, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Brown.
I'd like to support this as well. I'd also like to congratulate Councillor Rich for his enthusiasm in this particular motion and his commitment to a comprehensive, high-level, long-term vision. There's no doubt we need to have a plan to allow these coastal towns to be able to accommodate the future growth that they are inevitably going to have. As Councillor Rich said previously, we have some absolute world-class gems, regarding our coastal towns. They do need to be protected and looked after for future generations. And what I'm about to say isn't a criticism of past councils or planning authorities or officers at all, but in the past I think we've had this idea where we'll choose a town, we'll put a lot of infrastructure in there and the people will come. I don't think it really works like that anymore, and we're already seeing with a lot of the growth that's happening in a lot of the towns in the Shire, particularly in the coastal areas. If people want to live there, it's a market-based decision, that's where they'll go. And a plan like this is absolutely critical, like what Councillor Skinner was saying previously about the septic systems. We have to take all these things into account and we have to be ready for it in the future, because if people want to live there, we have to work with that. That's just the realities of a market-based system. So I congratulate Councillor Rich for his passion on this particular issue, and I hope that we can start the work on this very important process.
Councillor Argento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In one respect, this is a vision for the Council into the future, and I commend Councillor Rich in bringing this forward. It's a bit of a tragedy that 20 years ago, when the councils amalgamated, that it wasn't, or I don't know, it may have been considered back then to have a strategy when we lost Inverloch from our Shire. It appears since then, the towns have been allowed to grow in an ad hoc sort of fashion and with no clear direction. So if there was a strategy in the past, hopefully now is the time to renew that strategy and look into the future. We need to speak to all other stakeholders, other agencies, water boards, catchment authorities, and look at where their capacity is within our coastal towns. They may have greater capacity in certain areas that we're not aware of. Councillors, we need to look at all avenues, and hopefully the report that comes back in the March meeting will show which direction that will lead us in instigating this strategy. So I will be supporting this strategy, and I would ask fellow councillors to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to speak first. Thank you. I'm just watching Councillor Hill there. The last thing we need to do is in our planning and what we allow, where we allow development, is create a liability for the future. And I think that this investigation of this coastal strategy is ideal. It is really apt at this point in time, and it needs doing. And I notice in the gallery that we have our ex-councillor Davies, who this I think was one of her things that she certainly would have wanted to do in this council and thought very strongly about this. I welcome you here and thank you, Councillor, for coming. But the thing is, our coast, this will guide, what I'd hope to get out of this is to guide where development can go. And that would be my really strong point on supporting this. Thank you, Councillor. The Councillor Hill wants to go.
I support this as well. I'd like to congratulate our new councillor, 1 year old now, on a really well collaborated venture there. I'm just going to add one little thing here. The comment of a walking trail from Phillip Island to whatever, I just had a look at it. You can actually go from Venus Bay to Sandy Point, nearly all the way on the beach. The first bit, nearly all the way on the beach from Venus Bay to Walkerville, so you go from Allison's to Germany. And then Sandy Point. That looks quite viable. That looks quite a viable option. A future project.
The second.
I haven't spoken to this motion.
No, I spoke.
Right, Councillor Edwards.
Just a quick point. I spoke on the amendment, but I haven't actually spoken to the motion. Just a clarification. I am, as I said earlier, in support of the overall strategy. I am quite disappointed that we haven't got agriculture in there, because this I think it does need the inclusion of that, and hopefully that will get done in the report regardless. And I commend us to Councillor Hill now for identifying that there is actually natural resources that we don't need to mess with. We can actually use those natural resources that are already there, such as the beach, where it exists from right round through from Venus Bay right round to Waratah Bay. There's a natural beach already there that can be used, and we don't need to impact on agricultural land in that space whatsoever. So thank you for identifying that. And I would just ask that, I guess, I know it's not in there as the amendment, but that the Wetlands consider that we consider at least the protection of farming practices in this, so that where there is growth, if it's going to impact on anything there, that we have that inclusion, so that it's not off the table. And that also there are some existing plans, and that this report should include research of the existing plans. Both the Gippsland Coastal Board have done some work in recent years, and the Victorian Government as well, so that this report should take, and I understand that even the Council had a previous plan, so those should be the starting blocks. We shouldn't be starting from scratch here. They should be the starting blocks from which this can be built on. But I would like to see that agriculture gets, and the impact on agriculture gets included in here.
Thank you. There's no right of reply. There's no one against. There's no one against. There's no one that.
I'm not against.
She wasn't. There's no right of reply, councillors. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Yes. Sorry about that, Councillor Rich.
Unanimous. Madam Mayor.
I won't be calling for against. 8.1, Councillor Expenditure Report. Do I have a mover? Councillor Keel. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Hill.
Councillor Hill, was it?
Yep. Awesome.
All right, Councillor Keel.
Sorry, I was actually going to say we could move 8.1 and 8.2 as a block.
Has anybody got any objection?
Does anybody have an objection from anybody?
To put 8.1, 8.2 together, that's
and 8.3.
And 8.3, that'll give you something to speak on. Is anyone against? You can speak on any of the individual items.
Yep.
Councillor Hills, you happy with that? Yes.
Yep. Okay.
So we'll move those three items.
Councillor Keel and Councillor Hills.
That's the Assembly of Councillors. Better slow it down, Councillor Keel.
Yeah, I have. Okay, so can I talk?
Yes, Councillor
Thank
Keel.
you. I'll just be
Go
very
ahead.
quick. Okay.
You don't have to be quick.
Okay, so I'll talk slowly then. The council expenditure figures that are in there are for the last quarter. I know that councillors Rich, Edwards and Hills have not put their expenses in that report, so it's actually, the report is not a true record of the council expenditures for this last quarter. I know that in the coming months we will be reviewing the council expenditure policy with recommendations from the audit committee. So that's all. Thanks.
Seconder, Councillor Hill, you wish to speak?
Presumably, because there's no record there for me, that meant I must have put my expense in for the previous 3 months in the previous 3 months. Otherwise, it would be showed up in this one.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, it would have done. This is what occurred in that period. If the claim had gone in this period, it would have been shown up here. So that's correct. They don't just disappear if they're late. They do go into the next one. I do notice quite a variation in telephone bill cost too. 41, 60, 50, and then 3 massive ones. I'd like to report as well that I've found a way to reduce my capital expenditure going forward, because I got home about 2 weeks ago and discovered my mobile phone started ringing, and so I'm out of range, right? So what's going on here? The tower at Mount Eccles had been activated, so it's a recent tower. So we have now cancelled our landline, which was there for councillor access at home, and therefore that won't be getting claimed in the future.
Any other speakers on any of the items? I would just like to say that the councillor expenditure report is really a reimbursement in that period. It's what we've reimbursed over that period. It's really not a complete, true reflection of the costs of councillors for that period of time. It's actually what's being reimbursed to councillors over that time. I'll just make that clear. Thank you. Councillors like to vote, take the vote on these three?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
You're on to urgent or other business.
Urgent or other business. Where is that report? Is that
we have 1.1 request for leaves of absence.
We have urgent business.
Yeah, we do this. 9.1 request for leave of absence. Is there
request for leave of absence? Is there any councillors? Councillor updates, if there any?
Yeah, around we go.
Is this the report?
Yep.
I'll start with Councillor Brown. Brown will go around the table. Have you got any councillor reports or updates? Councillor Argento.
Just a report, Madam Chair. In regard, we've recently received news in relation to Murray Goulburn looking to terminate 52 positions from our Leenguffer factory. Madam Chair, you will be aware that Murray Goulburn's in the midst of a sort of a takeover or a buyout in regard to recent actions that the board had done and forced to look at. It is hope, Madam Chair, that once the new company, Saputo, which looks as though they will be taking over Murray Goulburn with a 50% vote that's required to initiate it, we'll be looking to up the milk intake and doing so via an increased milk price. The 52 positions, they will have an effect on our local community and where these individuals come from. They will have a rippling effect through our community. But it is hoped that once the increase in milk intake to 2.5 billion litres occurs, hopefully and more supplies come back to the factory, that these jobs may be reinstated later down the track. We'll watch this space, and for those that have lost the jobs, it certainly saddens me, although I believe there will be voluntary redundancies in the initial phase, so we'll just be watching this space to ensure those people are taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Argento. Councillor Skinner, do you have any reports?
Is this where we're doing
a report?
Apologies. Chantal?
Yes, Chantal.
Chantal started off the month by attending the Buy Foster Buy Local Foster Lodge, which was organised through the Chamber of Commerce, and both Councillor Edwards and I were going to attend. It's been odd, the stomach bag hit us all. But it was great to see that group who are really getting together and trying to promote buying, the benefits of buying within the township and supporting local businesses like produce, etc.
And especially in light of the fact that they're really, they're benefiting, but they're really dealing with the impact of the roadworks there at the moment, which I hope are nearly finished and readiness for the Great Victorian Parade. Do you want to do this phone call? Do you want to get it? Yeah, so the Great Victorian Parade is coming through.
You might like to show the press
on the 26th of November. And the town will be absolutely heaving, so all of the traders are going to be remaining open during that night. The gallery is going to be open, there's food, the camping's on the rep reserve. I think it'll be very exciting and invigorating, and lucky the streets. Just mention a couple of other things. As I mentioned before, I'm the council representative on the West Gippsland Library Corporation Board, so along with our director, Faith Page, we attended a briefing, really long briefing, which started the discussion that has been held about the review being undertaken about mobile library services across the whole 3 councils. I can't actually report on any of that's confidential at this point, but I will certainly be keeping fellow councillors informed as that goes ahead. I had attended the Coastal Agencies Liaison meeting, which meets quarterly, once again as the council representative this week. We had a look at the longevity progress, so hard hats and on-site, etc. So it's all going according to plan, although they're finding more perished areas as they go forward. One of the exciting things, opportunities for me, is they've got all these fantastic pylons that they are recycling, and I'm going to put up our hands to say we would really love some potentially for public art or public seating or fencing, and I love the idea of that. So, and they were sort of open to my suggestion. They're owned by Gippsland Port, I believe now. And I, along with probably a few other councillors, attended a sort of a review forum on the ALSE platform that we've used. And so I thought that was really great that they're following up with us as councillors, and so probably Councillor Kell and myself both most directly involved in the community as well as being councillor through that whole process. So they're really looking for opportunities to improve that service and community engagement. So I think that was a really useful thing to do. And last night I attended the community information session for the Unify event, which is a hardcore heavy metal rock festival, camping festival in Tarlowa, which is now in its 4th year. And they are championed as amazing organisers. They have done such a fantastic job. They're locals, the McLaren family, who in Korea, I believe. And one of the best things that they've done, if you had said to that community a few years ago, do you want a heavy metal rock festival, and all the patrons have covered in tats and black and piercings, and it's a fairly conservative older town, everyone would have gone, no way, we're never supporting this. They were so clever, they brought everybody on board. All the community groups have an opportunity to be involved in the festival. They do provide the food, they are helping parking. It's a huge win for the community because they can raise funds. They give tickets around to the people who are most affected, and they champion more and improved processes in emergency management and waste reduction and ticketing and just the event experience every single time they go ahead, and they're really to be admired. So I congratulate them, and I'll sit down.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor McEwen, have you any reports?
through you, Madam Mayor, I don't wish to go through all of the things I've done. There's a few things I'd like to mention. One is I went to the Currumbara Secondary College Art and Design night where they had awards. There was some fantastic things and the quality of work that's been done, and in that new facility is wonderful. So well done to the students at Currumbara Secondary College. Just a couple of parochial things. The Headland Opera Australia Music Concert at Menion is on the 1st of December, and as of last night, and we had a meeting, it was I think 22 people at the organising group meeting, which is fantastic, but I think we've sold 320 to 340 tickets. So there's very few tickets left, so that's going to be a fantastic event. The profits from that are going back to community activities in the Shire. It won't be a huge amount, but it is a major attraction and it does promote the area. So that's really fantastic. The second thing, just on the Garlic Festival, which is on the 17th of February, we're on track to double the numbers of stalls from 60 to about 100, over 100. So that's a really good outcome. There is going to be a focus on the dairy industry and on cheese. So there's going to be a precinct, and that was a suggestion from our local community saying that we're in a milk producing district, we should focus on that, so that's going to be done. And I think I can acknowledge that Councillor Skinner and Councillor Rich are rerunning the children's races next year, so I was asked to check. I'm sure we should be happy to do that. The other thing that I would like, I mentioned it earlier on today, but it's really significant, the Herald Sun Shine Awards, which are about women in agriculture, and there's a series of categories. Of the 5, 3 are in Gippsland, which is quite extraordinary. But 2 are in South Gippsland. That's the Plum Country Food Collective and Amber and Sally who have been involved and instrumental in that. And the other is Kirsten and Fleck Jones with the Garlic Festival and the Indian Produce Store. It is fantastic that these have been recognised, and this, in my view, is part of the agricultural future of the area. And it's interesting that the Age, I think it was last year, listed the top 30 food producers in Australia according to one of the editors of Epicure, and they came up with 7 are in Greater Southern Gippsland. 7. And you think that Margaret River only had 1, Barossa only had 1. We've got a growing reputation of being a high quality food producer, and good luck to those people who put it in, and congratulations to those women who've won the awards. Thank you.
Councillor Rich, would you have got any reports?
Yes, I don't have a lot of reports, but I did have an interesting conference at Canberra Airport by the South East Australian Transport Strategy Group. They, and I referenced it earlier today, they did raise that the federal government has almost finished the Pacific Highway from Brisbane to Sydney, and so the new allocation of the federal focus is going to be the coastal route from Sydney to Melbourne. And that means that we have to start advocating now to get our projects in the pipeline, because everyone organises their pipeline projects many years in front. We have to look at a number of things. There's freight routes as well as tourism routes. There's a coastal route that they're looking at doing, and there's also a freight route. So we need to make sure that the freight route doesn't just go on the Princes Highway, which therefore skips all of our southern shires, and so we have agreed with the neighbouring shires to work collaboratively to put together some form of submission to ensure that we get both the freight coming down the South Gippsland Highway and the official freight route and the official coastal tourist route to come along the coastal area. Then we'll go through all of the shires and back up through Bass and towards Melbourne. So that was quite important that we start putting that information together now for submission, so that we can actually get that funding in due course. Other than that, it's...
Thank you, Councillor Rich. Councillor Keele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But the most important thing this week was that our young student, Douglas Mancarella, was awarded the Ambulance Victoria Local Hero Award for saving the life of his father. His father collapsed, had a massive heart attack, collapsed, and actually had passed away. And because Douglas had done CPR at school and in his role also as a coach with the footy, he was able to revive him. and had 000 on the line who talked him through the county motions, and it was an amazing day. I actually get upset that. So that was actually fantastic because Paul Macarella is actually our neighbour, and living on the farm beside us, we didn't even see the ambulance go down there. It was, I think, a Sunday afternoon, and so he did an amazing job in bringing his father back and keeping him with us. So that was fantastic. Last week I went to the North School Fair, which Councillor Hill was there as well, which was a very, very hot day. But it was well turned out. The local committee really came in and supported that as well. Councillor Edwards and I, over the Baths Road Reserve, with some money that the council had put in to do some signage down there. So the volunteers and land care that look after that reserve are doing a fantastic job, keeping it all really well weeded and looked after, and it's actually fantastic. Last night I was in Foster for Cron Country Regional Tourism AGM, and was able to witness the streetscape that's all been finished down in Foster, which has been fantastic. There was a lot of money put into the streetscape down there, and I'm sure the Foster traders will be very happy with the result. A little bit of short-term pain for long-term gain, I think, but it was a fantastic result down there. It looks great. Councillor Argento and I went to the Port Royal Pool Long Jetty and had a viewing of where we're up to. Probably at the end of the last month, I think we went down there, and it was a beautiful, I think, windy day, but it was great to see where they're up to and what was happening there. And also, like Councillor Skinner, I was part of the ALSA feedback, I think, from going back to the community budgeting process and how that has worked for both council and the community. So it was a great opportunity to have my say in the ALSA program, so that was really great. And I opened the anti-gambling function here that council ran a few weeks ago, and gave us a massive insight into the problem that we do have with gambling in our shire. Even though we only have 105 poker machines, the loss of money from gambling is a bit of an issue for us, and it's something that we've now put policy together that I think is pretty great. So that's about it. Thank you.
Councillor Hill. That's right. Councillor Edwards, do you have?
Thank you. I just noticed a message to move the curtain. I just hadn't seen it. My apologies. Sorry, my apologies. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just my note, go on. Okay, not a lot from me this month. The Railway Precinct meeting, it's been great to see so many passionate people get involved with the Railway Precinct discussion. I'm looking forward to that progressing. The Anne Frank opening, which Councillor McEwen and Councillor Mitchell were also over at Coal Creek, was opened by Russell Broadbent MP, it's fantastic and worthwhile. I understand it's still there and very worthwhile going to see. We've also been to a new art gallery opening in Foster, and Reset Coin has opened a new art gallery there, which is fantastic for Foster, and obviously with Baths Road with Maxine. One just little curious thing that I noted, in terms of the Murray Goulburn jobs, and it will have an impact obviously on our local area, but I'm coming back to Councillor McEwen mentioned earlier that we should potentially have our, ask for equity. Well, I don't necessarily agree with the extraordinary amount of money that's gone to, taxpayers' money that's gone to Latrobe Valley, 260 million. However, if we're asking for equity in this case, because that equated to the 700 jobs in the Latrobe Valley was 371,428 per job. So if we were to multiply that back out to the 52 jobs in Langatha, that's 19.5 million. So if we're asking for equity, if that's the line we're going down, I'm not necessarily saying that I think that the amount of money was right going to, I think that that community needed support, most definitely, but that extraordinary amount of money. But just when we're asking for equity, if we're going down that line, then I think we've got reason to ask the state government to say, well, what are you going to do for Langatha? I think that's a question that we might need to ponder between now and the next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Rich just wants to make one more.
I actually think Councillor was providing you. I did also attend the Anne Frank museum opening. I attended it with my father because he also happens to have come from a similar area in time and place over in Europe. And I applaud South Gippsland for having such an exhibition on. The exhibition object is very good to say that perhaps we should have my father down for a day to have some schoolworks come through. Because it's one of those stories that it's good for him to talk about because he doesn't raise it very often. He's the type of character that just looks forward in life. But every once in a while to sit down and reflect on where he's come from and what makes up South Gippsland today and how we can reach all of those different communities and perspectives, I think is really vital. So I thank you for Councillor reminding us of that. That was a particularly good event and it is open until the end of February, as I understand it. So if anyone would like to go along, they should certainly go and have a look at that quite wondrous story.
Thank you, councillors. Oh, I should have been ready, shouldn't I? Let's move on. Which one are we up to now?
Committee updates.
Committee updates.
We don't have any.
We don't have any.
So urgent or other business?
And urgent and other business, we do have
urgent business.
Urgent business, and I think we vote on to bring the urgent business, whether we bring it on in the first place.
We need a mover for that.
No.
No, petition just coming.
Yeah, it's coming. So do I say what the urgent business is? Yes. The council considers the urgent business of council's agenda item 2, MAV contract, the electricity for the large tariff sites, Chief Executive Officer delegation as a current, it's to negotiate the MEV to give our CEO, because the price will come back in that they're able to secure a electricity contract before we can meet again. It'll probably be next week. So this is to delegate the CEO to take up that offer. And so that's why it is urgent business, councillors. Does anyone want to move it as urgent business?
I'll move it. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. Which way do you want to go? Anyway, Councillor McEwen, Councillor Skinner are moving that we accept this as urgent business. All those in favour to accept it, councillors?
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Yeah. Right, now we carry it. Now we move the motion.
Yeah, okay.
And do we have a mover?
So the recommendation.
It's
I'm happy to move that way.
Councillor McEwen is the mover and the seconder is Councillor Skinner. Councillor McEwen.
Look, very briefly, this is an opportunity to get services at a lower price. It's something that we should be endorsing, and given the timing of the tender and the arrangements with the MAV, we have to delegate it to our CEO. So I think this is really a procedural and sensible motion.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Just briefly, Madam Chair. This has been a shared service model, from the MAV, negotiating on behalf of council, so we are getting a significant discount, but when the tender comes out, we only have 10 days to act on that, so we really have to be timely and give our CEO the opportunity to act on that. But I will note that there is a significant increase in the tariff, and that is reflective of what we're all individually and on our business, in our businesses and farms and homes are experiencing. So the council is no different to any others. We're going to be paying more for our energy. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Who's left?
Councillor Hill left the room.
Yeah, but he's left, doesn't it? They've got that. It's unanimous with what's here. With whom is here.
Yep. So now, moving right along. Now we have the, sorry, just look at my page here. Public questions. We do not have any public questions, Madam Mayor. We have petitions and joint letters next. Item 11.1, Councillor McEwen.
Do we have any petitions?
Through you, Madam Chair, I have a petition in regard to councils must obtain home care services. The lead petitioner is Cheryl Moore. It's been signed by 1,549 people from across South Gippsland, including 23 from the Australian Services Union. The petition reads, Council must retain home and community care services. We, the undersigned, are concerned citizens who urge our Council to, 1, rescind the motion to look at options of transferring home support services to another organisation, and 2, to retain aged and disabled staff within South Gippsland Shire Council. And the recommendation that's being brought forward is that Council receives a notice of petition titled Council must retain home care services, and 2, the petition may undertake until Council considers the future provision of HAC services at Council's meeting yet to be determined.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, moved by, the recommendations moved by Councillor
McEwen.
Seconded. There's Councillor Keel. We'll move that motion, that recommendation. Anyone else?
It's only receiving the petition, it's not making a decision.
Speak on
We don't need to speak on this. We just say it on the table, would you like to speak on this? I don't think we speak.
No, you don't speak.
You don't speak on the petitions. It's just put to the vote.
It's slightly different vote.
If you wish to say why that our recommendations different to what they asked for their prayer,
I do think
I'll give you that.
Chair, if that's okay, just quickly.
Yeah.
Usually, as you suggested, when a petition is presented, it lays on the table and a report comes back to the next meeting. In this instance, all it can do is lay on the table, acknowledging that there has been 1,500 odd people who have signed that particular petition. We are not in a position to make any decisions about home and community care services right this second. There are a lot of factors at play, and so we can't bring it to the next meeting, which is why it's slightly different, that it lays on the table for Council to consider the future of home and community care services at the meeting yet to be determined. Once all those other factors are in play, and that could be even 6 to 12 months. But it certainly is an acknowledgement that a number of people have concerns in the community, maybe about losing a service, and we're not saying that's right or wrong.
All those in favour of supporting?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor. Noting Councillor Hill has returned.
With his hand up?
Yes.
We'll put the vote at 4021. Thank you. Answers to previous questions. We have no previous questions.
Yeah, that's correct. Madam Mayor, as I mentioned before, we didn't have any questions on notice. We don't have any answers to previous questions on notice either.
And we're going into closed session. Do we have a mover to go into closed session? Councillor Keel? Councillor Argento? All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Madam Mayor. Suspend standing orders for 10 minutes while we clear the room.
No, we're going to
Can I suggest that we change the order so that once we're in that,
we haven't moved into close yet. We're going to suspend orders for 10 minutes.
Yes, and have a break. That's all right, Councillor. I know what you're doing.
Was that for 10 minutes?
Yes, for 10 minutes. Councillor, 10 minutes break. Councillor. Pardon? Thank you. Bye. Whatever.